So good morning. This morning I am joined by Gary Kibble, Chief Digital and Marketing Officer at Wickes. Gary and I have known each other for a number of years. And Gary, thank you for joining me on what is a beautiful day, as demonstrated by what is a real background, not a fake background behind you, of your lovely garden. Morning.
Thank you. Yeah, great to be here. Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. So we've got some questions as ever to go through. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. For anyone who doesn't know you, so obviously you're Wickes at the moment. You've previously been CMO at Sainsbury's Argos, Mothercare. Gary is an amazingly vibrant Chief Marketing Officer, and I think I can confidently say, of whenever I've asked people over the years, you are the boss that everybody wants to work for. Literally, when we're taking up references, speaking to people, you are the boss that everybody loves, everybody wants to work for, and everyone says you had such a positive experience on their careers. So absolutely hats off to you for that, Gary. That's really quite something. So if I may, I'm going to dive straight in with the questions. So your career journey has been exceptional. What would you recommend to marketers who also aspire to become a chief marketing officer or chief digital and marketing officer?
Yeah, sure. Okay. I mean, I think I'd probably sort of talk at it, maybe sort of thinking about it in four ways, actually, in terms of responding to that question. I think the important point, by the way, before I sort of walk through maybe kind of four big things that I call out, is that, this isn't sort of rocket science. What I'm going to describe, a lot of it is about sort of behaviors and the way you think and position yourself. I think that is important because it says this is accessible to everyone, in my opinion and experience. I just wanted to sort of make that point at the start. So as I say, sort of four things I'll be calling out. I mean, the first one actually is a really simple one, which is all around sort of being curious, being inquisitive. If I think right back to my early days at WH Smith's, I was probably always the first person to put my hand up and want to be involved in new programs or projects of work. And it was that sort of sense of kind of wanting to put myself forwards, even if actually I didn't think maybe at the time I had the skill set. I definitely think that was something that stood me in very good stead from the kind of early onset of my career. So the first thing I call out is that. So be curious, sort of be inquisitive and put your hand up. That'd be the first thing. The second thing is, I don't think it had a name in the early part of my career, but I think it's very well trailed now, which is all around kind of imposter syndrome. And I just wanted to bust a myth if it was there, which is, people at senior levels in the organization don't suffer with imposter syndrome. I think that's nonsense. So I think we absolutely do. And just to call out that, I suffer in inverted commas, but I sort of have faced into that at many points in my career, and I face into it now actually, and I'm sort of at peace with it. So the second thing I'd say is stop stressing about it. The reality is everybody has it. And what I'd say actually is I've sort of spun it a little bit from being a negative to a positive, because for me, the points at which I feel that I'm in that kind of mode of imposter syndrome is probably the point when I'm actually stretching myself most, because I'm outside my comfort zone. So I tried to turn it from a positive to a kind of learning experience. So as I say, the second thing is just don't worry about it, like hold it lightly, and we all suffer with it. That's the second thing I'd say. The third thing actually, and it was really lovely to hear you say what you just said, because third thing I'd say is look after people. Yeah, look after the people that are around you. So, one of my favorite quotes that I try and stay true to is the Maya Angelou quote, which many people will know, but I sort of paraphrase it as, people will never remember what you said. They'll never remember what you did. They'll always remember the way you made them feel. Yeah. And that, I take that to heart, and I really go out of my way to try and make people feel special. So that is a really important part of kind of my DNA, and I think what allowed me to be a CMO in an organization like Wickes. And then the last one is something I really struggled with actually, but if I was a dog, I'd definitely be a Labrador. So, I love to be liked. I need to be walked and fed, and occasionally stroked. And I think probably one of the things that I've sort of grown into is acknowledging that not everyone is going to like me, and that's has to be okay.
Yeah.
And definitely in the early part of my career, I always wanted to be liked, and therefore I avoided confrontation and difficult conversations as I searched for kind of serenity and sort of friendships. And I think in hindsight, I think if I'd learned the lesson earlier that that isn't always going to be true, that would have been helpful. So those are 4 things I'd call out, Suzie.
Really, really good things. And thank you for saying that about imposter syndrome as well, because I see it a lot as we interview people and we really get to know our kind of community at head of, director and chief of level. And I think there are very few exceptions. I think everybody has to deal with it at some point in their career. It's natural, it's normal. You know, hold it lightly, to your point, and just relax a bit about it. So thank you. I think that's a really useful comment. So you've worked with some fabulous retail brands. So question for you a bit more on the marketing side. So what would you say has been your most defining campaign or experience so far out of those companies you've worked with?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, the first thing I'll say is, you know, I think I have been incredibly fortunate in my career. I've always loved what I've done. Work has never, ever been a chore for me. Passionate about the brands I've worked for and always given huge amounts of opportunity, which I've sort of relished. So there naturally, as a consequence of that, there's lots of kind of lots of sort of amazing experiences and amazing memories that I could talk to. But there are 3 that stand out. I've sort of been reflecting a bit on this, but definitely the first one is something I'm really proud of, which is when we launched the Very brand, so very.com. We launched that in 2009. And I love seeing the kind of financial and trading updates from the Very Group, because that brand has gone from strength to strength.
Yeah.
And like I say, I remember the hard yards of kind of getting that brand up to the position where we could launch it in 2009. And by the way, it didn't come out of the blocks quickly. We had quite a few challenges, and it was 6 months of hard work to get it to where we needed it to be. But you know, now it's a sort of £2 billion retail brand, and as I say, I played a small part in launching that brand back in 2009. So that definitely has to be one. The second one I think is actually is more about an activity as opposed to the brands in which I conducted that activity. So developing the brand purpose for actually 3 brands, but for Mothercare, for Argos, and for Wickes. I've absolutely loved that. And the reason I've loved that is it's the point in my time where you could really connect with colleagues emotionally rather than rationally. Because you know, if you think about a brand purpose, you know, Simon Sinek always says, you know, it's not what you do, it's not how you do it, it's your why. And the minute you can tap into a brand's why, you get a huge amount of sort of emotional connection with colleagues. And I've just had so much pleasure from tapping into the brand purpose, being able to share it, and then seeing people connect with it. So that's definitely the second thing, really passionate about that. And then the third one actually is something which has happened a bit more recently. I do love data, and I think marketing is a blend of art and science. So you can never get rid of that marketing intuition and gut feel, but it has to be augmented now with data. And that maybe wasn't true in the late 90s, but it's definitely true now. And I'm really proud of some work we've been doing around an AI machine learning model, which has created something that we call the missions motivation engine, or the MME, which effectively predicts the missions that customers are on before we know they're on them, which means we can then talk to them about, you know, relevant communications at the right point in their customer journey. So that's the third thing. It's really about how we bring data in with that retail marketing intuition and gut feel.
Yeah, lots of changes certainly on the AI side at the moment, and which neatly brings me on to the, you know, the digital landscape is evolving at such a pace. I mean, you know, certainly in the last 12 months with these new technologies coming through. How do you think that's kind of impact in the way which customers now engage with the brands?
Yeah, I do. I mean, massively, actually. I think, you know, if I go back probably to my time at Very, I joined Very. It wasn't called Very at the time, of course, but in 2004. And if I go right back to that point, my sort of sense then is that, you know, customers back then were interacting with single channel. actually sort of retail commerce through digital devices didn't really happen. But as it started to emerge through the back end of sort of 2000 and sort of 5, 6, 7, definitely customers were just engaging with a single channel. They either shopped offline or they shopped online. And then we went through this phase of almost a multi-channel experience where they would dip into the channels and go from start to finish on a channel, whether that be offline, whether that be online. And when you stand back now, I believe that we are truly omni-channel as a sort of nation of shoppers. And one of the things that means is that we have to, as marketeers, we have to give seamless experiences, agnostic of the channel that the customer is choosing to interact with you in. So I think that's a big change that we've seen over the last sort of 8 to 10 years. The next thing I'd say is that, unfortunately, in retail, sometimes stuff goes wrong. And what I have found is that as consumers have become more sort of digitally native, when it does go wrong, that display of dissatisfaction is much more public now than it ever used to be because of social media, effectively. So I just think as brands in a digital world, we need to be more consistent. We need to have a much bigger emphasis on sort of consumer to consumer kind of marketing rather than brand to consumer. So that's definitely a shift. The penultimate one probably actually is around speed of resolution. So a little bit connected to that point when it goes wrong. But I think that in the digital world, the customers' expectations have increased. That they've shortened the time window that they give to brands to kind of put right any wrong. That's been accelerated from a sort of digital perspective over the last 5 or 10 years. And then I'll just finish by sort of reflecting on maybe a point I made in answer to the earlier question, which is the role of kind of data. So for me, digital equals data. And naturally, the more data you have, the better you can understand kind of the role of each of your channels, the role each of those channels has on the path to purchase, which then allows you to understand better kind of channel and activity return on investment. So ultimately, as marketeers, making sure that every pound we spend is more efficient than the last pound we spent. So that would be a bit of a flavour, Suzie, as to kind of some of the things I've observed over the past, as I say, sort of probably 15 years, actually, when I think about that digital shift.
And then obviously more recently, the significance and importance of data within the teams. And I can relate to that. We're certainly seeing a significant increase in the number of roles within the kind of marketing and digital teams where they are data related marketing and digital roles. These lines are all blurred now, but the skill set that the clients are looking for is kind of a data first marketeer seems to be the common theme at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And connected to that, I think that's only going to accelerate. So I see some of this stuff about the metaverse is dead. They may be right, they may be wrong. But one thing I do know is from a sort of AI perspective, that is going to be an incredibly important skill set for the future marketeer. And I was chatting to some of our partners at both Google and at Cara, our media agency, and they were talking about the role of what's called a prompter, which effectively is a new skill set which is developing now and commands big salaries. If you're a really strong prompter, then you can extract fantastic information from an AI perspective. So all this is changing and changing quickly. So definitely one to watch for marketeers.
Isn't it just, and talking about AI prompters, it's something that we've already had requests about from our CDOs and our CMOs, and it's a very new skill. It's very specialized. We had Roger Gupta on just a few weeks ago speaking about AI and the changes that will have on these marketing and digital teams. And I think we're going to see that literally within the next 6 months in terms of the new skill sets coming through. Some of the meetings we've done very recently, they're after these skill sets already. So exciting times, and which leads me on to kind of priorities. There's an awful lot for the chief ops to do right now, but what do you think will be some of the key priorities for the chief marketing and digital officers in the next year or so?
So I think I'll probably sort of pick up with that, with where you sort of left off that last question, in as much as, that whole world of AI, machine learning, whether you're a believer or not, but metaverse, within that, some of the tools that sit below AI, sort of chat GPT, etc. So as a marketeer, holding that intellectual curiosity around all of these kind of developments that are coming incredibly quickly. The rate of change is going to be significant in this space. So there's a big piece there for me. I would then connect to that a comment I made earlier probably, which is how you as a marketeer balance the art with the science. So I think as marketeers, we have to maintain a degree of sort of creativity, of kind of intuition, of gut feel, and actually that whole role of sort of data should augment that as opposed to take over that. So I think there'll be a real skill in the future CMO to work out, when does it feel right versus when does the data tell me it's right, and actually blending that is going to be a skill. So I definitely call out that. Probably the third bit I'll just call out. Again, I did mention I do like data, and I love the contribution that econometric modeling makes to our decision making as marketeers. And you'll always find cynics around the board table in terms of your marketing investment. I stress that marketing is an investment as opposed to a cost. It might sound very subtle, but it's very important in terms of how you position, marketing's contribution around the board table. And I think actually socializing econometric performance around the board table does shift the perception of marketing quite quickly. When you can say, I know the pound that I spent in that channel generated this return, and I know where I am on the diminishing returns curve. So if you give me another pound, I can give you this back. And if you need to take a pound away, I'm going to take it from over here. That's really, really powerful, and really kind of positions marketing as a lot more than just the art that it used to be seen maybe 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, big changes, really big changes there. We seem to be seeing bigger changes now in these last few years than we have done for quite some time. What about career advice? I mean, you're a brilliant leader of teams. I'm hoping you've got a nice little gem for me on this one, Gary. What career advice were you given that's kind of stayed with you that you would share?
Again, it's not massively insightful, Suzie, so I may let you down a bit here. But the important thing is anyone can do what I'm gonna say to that, which is, for me, the single biggest sort of piece of career advice I think is literally just to be yourself, and I mean be your whole self. So that means being incredibly authentic, and I think one has to acknowledge that if you want to be your sort of whole self, that does mean you do not leave your personality at the door, even if that means risking that some people won't like the whole you. Which sort of goes right back to the sort of one of the comments I made right at the top. That you have to be comfortable with that, and again hold that lightly. That is going to be okay. So I think the single biggest piece of advice I could possibly give is just to be yourself and your whole self, warts and all.
I love that, and I think what I'd probably add to that, maybe to anyone who's sort of starting out in their marketing or digital careers, is really consider culture fit as you are joining an organization, because in order to genuinely be your whole self or your authentic self, that environment's got to be right for you. If it goes wrong, it's because people are trying too hard to adapt themselves to suit the culture, and that never works long term. It's just something, people are really aware about that as they go through the interview processes. And if you've got support from a recruiter, then ask them about what the culture of that business is like. Do your research, ask people who work there, because it's all about the fit.
It is, absolutely. And I again, something I've learned is sometimes you look at leaders in organizations and you think, actually, I need to be a bit more like them. And, and I've tried that. The reality is, if you do that, you'll only ever be second best. Whereas if you're your true self, you have an opportunity to be the best. And I think, I learned that the hard way, actually, which is why, I am who I am, and acknowledging that everyone likes me. And that's a shame, but that's okay too.
I think most people do. I think you're quite safe there. And finally, what's next for you? What sort of exciting things have you got in store for your journey?
Um, I'm as I mentioned, I've been very, very lucky. I've genuinely always loved what I've done, but I'm particularly loving the contribution I'm making to the Wickes business. The culture of the organisation is incredible. We have an awesome exec leadership team, and we've still got some fantastic work we need to do. So I'm sort of unwavering on that path. I love mentoring people. I do a bit of work with diversity in retail mentoring. I mentor people internally and some people externally. That's a real passion point of mine. So I want to be able to continue to do that, if not do more of that. And I think the third thing, if I just sort of lift my gaze a little bit, is I'd love to make contribution to organisations at a non-exec level. I think I've got a lot to offer from a digital perspective, a marketing and a retail perspective. I'd love to be able to make that contribution to different businesses actually outside of my sort of exec commitments. So sort of three things there really, Suzie.
Yeah, and I would think that many businesses would benefit enormously with your sort of non-executive guidance, as it were, with everything that you've learned to date. And yeah, thank you, Gary. Really, really interesting answers there, and I wish Wickes continued success. You know, it's a fantastic culture, and I'm a firm believer that the culture comes from that senior leadership team. So, as demonstrated by yourself, and your passion continues to shine through. So, thank you ever so much for joining. Greatly appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you, Suzie. Good to see you.
Absolute pleasure.